Last year, I made a video about the GoPro Hero 10 where I said that it was practically perfect, and then this year, GoPro decided to turn things up one louder by going to 11. And before going any further, I do want to let you know that GoPro did send me the Hero 11 Black at no charge, but I don't have to make a video about it or say anything about it or do anything with it. But I'm making this video because I really love GoPros. There is so much to cover in this video about this camera, so this is going to be a pretty long one. Definitely use chapter markers if you want to skip around to the parts that are most relevant to you. In my Hero 10 review, I did go through my entire history with GoPros, having used them for like 11 years at this point. I am a huge fan of these cameras, and that continues with the 11. But before jumping too far into the world of 11, let's jump straight to the spoiler, because I know a big question that people have is it worth the upgrade from the Hero 10? If you have the Hero 10, I don't think that the Hero 11 is worth the upgrade unless you need it for a few of the very specific features that it has to offer over the 10. If you have anything earlier than the 10, even up to the 9, then I would say the 11 is definitely worth the upgrade. If you have the 1 through 8, it's kind of a no-brainer. The 9 is kind of a gray area, but I do think that it is worth the upgrade if for no other reason than just the faster built-in processor and stuff that makes this just easier to use and makes the interface more responsive and, you know, makes the overall experience much better. And the key features that I think do make the 11 stand out over the 10 are the taller sensor, the ability to use Hyperview, one-button modes for certain time-lapse and stuff, which is super awesome, horizon lock, and you have a lot more flexibility with using 4K 120 and 10-bit color, which we will talk about a little bit later. And of course, that's all going to depend on your specific workflow. If you're not somebody who ever uses time lapses and things, those one-button star trail features or one-button time lapses aren't really gonna make a difference to you. If you're not somebody who shoots vertical video at all, you probably won't care about the taller sensor very much. But if you are somebody who does things like that, then those could be total game changers. So let's start with the basics. The Hero 10 and the Hero 11 look pretty much identical. Really, the only difference externally is that this one says 10 and this one says 11. I'm actually really happy about that for two reasons. One is that I just love this form factor. It is a little bit chunky, but I like that. It feels, I don't know, it just feels good to use. It feels good to hold. It doesn't take up a ton of space. In the past, even though GoPros were smaller, they had to go in these big casings, these big waterproof, shockproof casings. This is a much smaller camera, but once you put it in its shock mount that you can actually attach to things and makes it waterproof and makes it shockproof because the camera itself is pretty delicate, it's actually a lot bigger and bulkier than the Hero 11 is. Even other models like the Heroes 5, 6, and 7 that were waterproof without needing a housing, they are significantly smaller, but they don't have any mounts on there, so then you have to put them in a shell in order to mount them, whereas this has, I guess they call these little fingers. It's got fingers right there, and then you can just mount it on everything. This isn't a new feature for the 11, but it's just something really nice about this form factor. I really like it. It's personal preference. Now, if you do want the smaller camera, there is the Hero 11 Mini, which I haven't used yet, but it's a mini version of the Hero 11, basically with no displays, and it's just sort of smaller, but it's got the same sensor and the same image quality. And one big difference about what you get with the Hero 11 Black is that it comes with the Enduro battery. You can tell because it's got the white accents, whereas the standard battery has these fantastic blue accents. The Enduro battery is designed to enduro more heat and more cold and just give you better performance in the camera. It's great that the camera just comes with that now. Definitely not something that's worth the upgrade over, because I think if you just buy these separately, this is $20, this is $25. And the second reason I'm happy that it doesn't look any different is because you can still use all of the accessories for the 9 and the 10 and even earlier. If you have specific housings and casings for either the 9 or the 10, they will work perfectly with the 11. I even put my screen protectors. I have some extra screen protectors for this one, which I put on here. And even just old accessories like this is the first GoPro accessory I ever bought back in 2011. It's called the Go Pole because it's a pole for the GoPro. This was even like sort of pre-selfie stick. So it was like, wow, putting a camera on a stick, that's crazy. But because GoPros haven't changed their mount at all, I can put this GoPro Hero 11 onto this 11-year-old mount and still use it. The compatibility by not really changing much on the cameras is awesome because You don't have to upgrade accessories every time you get a new camera, and I think that's amazing. So now let's get a sense for some of the new features on the Hero 11 by talking about its biggest new feature, which is that taller sensor. So while you are getting the same image quality as the Hero 10, you're getting a taller sensor, which is essentially now it's a big square. And the reason that's a big deal is because it allows for you to easily create horizontal and vertical video at full resolution. If you've ever tried to make a vertical video horizontal or make a horizontal video vertical, you know that the results usually don't look that great, and this pretty much solves that problem. And if you film stuff at full frame where you just get this square resolution, you can then take that same clip and use it both ways. You can have full resolution widescreen and full resolution vertical if you need to. So if you're somebody who uses the same footage across multiple platforms, both horizontally and vertically, you don't really have to compromise anymore. They both can look excellent. And even though I'm not someone who really does much vertical video at all, obviously in the world, there are many people who do a lot of vertical video. So I think that that's a really big feature, and that could be a reason to upgrade over the 10 or previous model. Beyond the sensor, the GoPro Hero 11 has a lot of hyperbole with Hyperview and Hypersmooth. Both of those are pretty cool, starting with Hypersmooth, which is their stabilization. Even with the very first, the Hero 7 was the first GoPro that had built-in Hypersmooth, and I thought that this was pretty amazing. Like, version 1 was pretty awesome and magical. Version 4 on the 10, it was a perfect 10. I don't know what more you could want from it, and somehow it's even better on the 11. This is me running with stabilization. This is me running with stabilization. I don't know which camera to look at. And we can even try horizon lock. So the 10 doesn't have it on, the 11 does. If I rotate it, this is what, I don't know, this is what that looks like. These are both at 5.3K, by the way. Hope that's okay. But it was so good on the 10, it's hard to show how it's better on the 11, but there are a few things to keep in mind. The first one being that now there's like an auto boost feature. So whenever you use electronic image stabilization on pretty much any camera, the way that that works is the camera crops in a little bit on the image, and then it can sort of adjust things to keep it stable, but you kind of have to crop in a little bit. With action cameras, a lot of times people want wide field of view, so turning on stabilization and then cropping in loses that wide field of view. So what the boost functionality does is it sort of senses how much stabilization is needed and then zooms in and out accordingly. It's very subtle and you probably won't notice it, but what it means is when you have that enabled, you're going to always have the widest field of view possible with the amount of stabilization that you need. The other thing that is a lot more noticeable is horizon lock, which is amazing. So here's an example of horizon lock. I record over here now on the GoPro, and by the way, this is what the GoPro microphone sounds like. So now you can hear what the microphone sounds like. I think it's actually pretty decent and usable. I've used the audio from the Hero 10 many times in videos, and even just only using this camera to make videos. It's definitely very usable, even though it's not a full studio microphone. But anyway, horizon lock. I'm going to rotate the camera 360 degrees, but you're not going to see me rotating. Hopefully you're not getting a lot of motion sickness or anything because the horizon is just staying locked. Pretty amazing. And now would probably also be a good time to talk about Hyperview. So here I'm recording in my normal linear mode. So this is linear mode, as you might know, is the best mode to make things look normal. If you want to match GoPro footage with a regular camera where things aren't distorted, linear mode is pretty much the way to go, and you know, it works really well. We have our normal wide field of view, which is, believe it or not, a little bit wider than linear, and this is where it starts to look more like a GoPro or an action camera, where you're almost getting a little bit of that fisheye look. Look for things like straight lines to start becoming a little warped and distorted. And then of course we have super view. Up until now this has been as wide as you can go without an extra accessory, so this is as wide as the Hero 10 will go. Super view is really fun, and it's super wide, and if I give you like, you know, my first person point of view perspective here, this is kind of what that looks like. But we can take things even further. So this is super view, and now this is Hyperview, which is absolutely absurd. It makes things look really weird. The camera is basically touching me right now, and this is what that looks like. So, hello, you can even see my hand still. it's ridiculous. So it's definitely going to distort things in weird ways, but it's really great for first-person FPV kind of stuff that makes it really feel like you have that field of view, or if you just need something, look how giant this room looks because of this Hyperview here. This room is not that big at all in person. Look at all the space I have to my camera. My giant arm, my arm is 8 feet long now. I have noticed a few times with Hyperview that weird things start happening around the edge of the frame sometimes. I don't really know how it does it, but it's almost like a 180-degree field of view, and so depending on how you're moving and how complex things are, it can sort of sometimes just look a little strange, but it is really fun. If you get the Hero 11, definitely play with Hyperview just to see what it does and if you want to have fun with it, because it's more fun than I ever expected it to be, honestly. And one of my favorite upgrades with the 11 is the addition of more one-button modes for time lapses and stuff like that. To some people, this might not be a big deal. For me, this is a huge deal, and the way that I like to use GoPros, this actually would be the reason that I would want to upgrade from the 10 to the 11, because I do spend a lot of time with the 10 and other GoPros trying to figure out star time lapses and star trails and night lapses and light painting and all that kind of stuff, which is totally possible with these cameras, but it's so easy with this one, because if you've ever tried to do any long night time-lapse stuff, the frustration is you set all your settings, you hope for the best, you set up the camera, you have to wait a long time, and then if things didn't work out, oftentimes you have to wait till the next night and hope the weather is good. This is just one button and it kind of nails it every time. So this is the 10 and this is the 11, and we go into the time-lapse modes. This is where you can see things are different. So on the 10, you can see I have time warp, time lapse, and night lapse, and that's it. And then I can make custom settings if I want to. On the 11, we have all those and more. So you have time warp, you have star trails, you have light painting, you have vehicle lights, time lapse, and then night lapse. There's just a lot more that you can do with this, and the ones I've been having the most fun with are star trails and light painting. There's pretty much nothing else that you need to do other than focus on the technique, framing and composing your shot. If you're doing something like light painting, figuring out what lights you want to use and how you want to play around with those, and then you just have fun with it, and the camera gets out of the way, and that's one of my absolutely favorite things about it. And one of the other big differences that I mentioned are frame rates and color. So frame rates, you have quite a few options. You can go all the way up to 5.3K on both of these cameras, the 10 and the 11, but you have a lot fewer limitations on the 11. As has been the case in the past, you do have limits with frame rates versus your resolution, the lens that you're using. Not every lens thing can use every resolution. Hyperview is a little bit limited, but even with Superview, the previously widest field of view, you can do 5.3K 60 on the Hero 11, which is pretty great. 240 FPS hasn't really changed. Both cameras still need to be on wide, and they're limited to 2.7K if you want to do 240 FPS, which is really, really fun. You can do 4K 120 all the way up to Superview in the Hero 11. Now, one thing that you may or may not be excited about, but I think you should be really excited about with the Hero 10 versus the Hero 11, 11 versus 10, is that the 11 has 10-bit color, not 11-bit color. And ironically, the 10 does not have 10-bit color. And I did not care a bit about color bits for a long time, up until I got my new Sony cameras about 1.5 years ago. That was the first time I used 10-bit color, and at the time I was cutting between a 10-bit camera and an 8-bit camera, and after doing that for a few months, I really started to notice the difference. What I'm going to do is put a link in the description of this video to an article from B&H Photo that covers pretty much everything you need to know about color bit depths. But one thing I wanted to pull out from that right now is this little graph here that shows what it means when people say that 10-bit color has more colors. The color spectrum hasn't changed. It's not inventing new colors that you've never heard of, like blurple or something. But if you notice, between all the different colors, there's a much finer gradient. So what that means is it's easier for the cameras to not only reproduce colors more accurately, but it also gives you a lot more flexibility when you're editing your footage afterwards and you want to adjust the colors, adjust the footage, or try to match footage. And having 10-bit color makes that easy because it gives you a lot more flexibility. And speaking of working with footage, I will also put a link in the description to a Dropbox folder that has just sample footage from the Hero 11 if you want to take that and download it and try it out on your computer to see how it works with your system and what you think of it. I'll do do my best to provide a variety of types of footage and frame rates and resolutions and stuff, and hopefully that will be helpful if you need it. And speaking of frame rates and resolutions, the Hero 11 does have 27 megapixel still photos, so if you want to use your GoPro for stills, it is just a better stills camera than previous ones because you have a sensor with more resolution. That makes sense, right? Hope these jokes don't get censored. So now let's talk about something that's sure to fire a lot of people up: overheating. For me, even with the Hero 10, overheating hasn't been an issue because I don't really film for extended periods of time with the GoPro. I tend to record a lot of shorter clips. But just to see if there are differences in overheating between the 10 and 11, I did do a few tests. And while these might not be the most scientifically sound tests in the world, I hope they're at least a little bit helpful. In total, I ran 4 overheating tests, starting with basically the most aggressive to the most ideal to see how the cameras would perform. And honestly, I wasn't really expecting to see a difference in the cameras because in using them, I don't notice a difference, but the 11 did outperform the 10 in my test, at least to some degree, pretty much every time. Degree, because heat degrees. So the first test was outdoors when it was 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 41 degrees Celsius. It was very hot. The cameras were directly in the sun. After this test, the cameras were 135 degrees Fahrenheit physically, the outside of them, which I think is 57 degrees Celsius, if I remember what I looked up on my watch a minute ago. The cameras are set to 4K 60. The Hero 10 is on the left and the 11 is on the right. The 10 overheated after 12 minutes and 32 seconds, while the 11 overheated after 13 minutes and 28 seconds. So there's definitely a difference, although it was pretty minor. I then let the cameras cool down, let the batteries recharge. Everybody was feeling good. Actually got a little bit hotter because it got to be later in the day. And then I put the cameras back outside. This time, instead of 4K 60, I wanted them to be at their maximum 24 FPS frame rate. So that meant that the Hero 10, the 10, was at 5.3K, while the Hero 11 was also at 5.3K, but in full frame. So it was doing the full square that could be cropped vertically or horizontally. Same as before, the 10 is on the left and the 11 is on the right. In this case, 11 overheated at 17:26, while the 10 overheated at 19 minutes and 36 seconds. So in this case, the 11 did overheat faster. This is the one test where the 11 overheated faster, but it was running in a mode that the 10 doesn't even have. One thing that GoPro does say about overheating is that airflow is pretty important, and I've definitely found this to be true because after running these tests, I then went on some bike rides with the Hero 11, and even with these same settings, when I had the Hero 11 mounted to my bike and there's airflow, it never overheated. I kept trying to ride around until it overheated, and then eventually I got tired and I just had to go home and give up, and the camera was still going the whole time. So the worst thing you can do with a GoPro, which is a very weather sealed camera, is just leave it sitting stationary in the heat, because then it is just going to generate heat, especially if the bottom is covered by the surface that it's on. If there's some kind of airflow because the camera's moving or doing something, then it's a lot less prone to overheating. That's probably true for just about any action camera, not just GoPros. So because of that, one thing that GoPro did with the Hero 10 was they added a mode called tripod mode. And so tripod mode is something you can turn on by swiping down, and then there's this little lightning bolt here. I do usually keep mine in maximum video performance mode because I want maximum video performance, but there is also an extended battery mode, and there is also tripod mode down here, which, as the camera says, is optimized for stationary video recording without airflow to cool the camera. Hypersmooth video stabilization and a GPS are off in this mode. So I turn on tripod mode there. Now the Hero 11 Black currently does not have tripod mode, which I'm really kind of confused by. So with the 11, if I swipe down, there is no tripod mode, but if I swipe over, there's a slightly different looking menu here. There is this thing here that says Controls Pro or Easy. By default, the Hero 11 is gonna come out of the box with its controls set to Easy. And basically what that means is it's fully automatic. If somebody's never used a GoPro or you just don't wanna think about it, just do that. It will adjust everything for you and make it look as good as possible in those circumstances. It's an easy mode. If you're somebody who's used GoPros before or you're comfortable with it, then you can just flip this little switch or this little thingy slider to Pro mode, and then you have access to all of the customization like you always have. But this little screen here is also where we have video mode, and if I go here, I can have highest quality or extended battery, but there's no tripod mode. So what I did was I put the 10 into tripod mode and I put the 11 into extended battery mode, which is sort of this thing that's gonna turn off some of those extra features, and I made sure that Hypersmooth wasn't turned on. And then I put the cameras in a slightly less demanding environment. In my third test, they were outdoors in sunlight, so they got pretty hot, and they were running at 4K 24. I switched them around on accident. So in this test, the 10 is on the right and the 11 is on the left. The 10 overheated after 18 minutes and 22 seconds, while the 11 lasted for 30 minutes and 41 seconds. So even in that stationary mode, without specifically being in tripod mode, the 11 did outlast the 10. But even though it wasn't quite as hot outside that day, the cameras were still in the sun and they got pretty warm. So for the last test, I wanted to put them in a more ideal environment. I put them in this room where it's nice and cool, because I'm in here and I'm so cool. It's nice and cool in here. I put the cameras in the same mode and then let them run at 4K 24. In this test, the 10 is on the left and the 11 is on the right. So at 4K 24 with the energy saving modes, the 10 overheated after 39 minutes and 19 seconds, but the 11 went all the way to 1 hour and 12 minutes and 55 seconds before overheating. That is a huge difference that I absolutely did not expect. But I do want to talk about why cameras, not even just GoPros, but why cameras in general overheat, because I think that this is important to understand. Last year when I said that the Hero 10 was practically perfect, I got bombarded with people telling me that I'm wrong because the camera overheats. And then the list of demands that people wanted from a perfect camera was basically describing like a $5,000 or $10,000 cinema camera. I guess I should have said it's a perfect action camera, because that's a different thing than being a perfect camera. But basically, it's important to remember that these cameras are doing a lot. There's all these frame rates, there's all these resolutions in here, there's all these processors handling 10-bit color, keeping the stabilization going, activating GPS. That takes a lot of processing power, and the processors, the parts inside the cameras, generate heat to do that, and the heat just can't escape really well because the cameras are also weather and waterproof. If you look at some of the older GoPros, like this is the Hero 3 Black, this camera never overheats. Of course, it doesn't have the same frame rates either. It only goes to 2.7K, but it never overheats. And it is a very like small, delicate camera with thin plastic walls. It's easier for heat to dissipate from this camera. But it's also not waterproof or shock resistant. It is very delicate, which is why you had to put them in those external housings to use them underwater and stuff like that. Now, starting with the Hero 5, that's when GoPro stopped requiring you to use an external housing. So that means that in order to dissipate heat, they would need to use either vents or thinner materials, which would make the camera less waterproof and less durable. So from a designer's perspective, you're looking at this as you have to make a compromise. You're either going to have overheating, but a more durable, waterproof camera, or you're not going to have overheating, but then you're going to have a camera that's not as durable or waterproof. So I guess when it comes to wrapping up the segment about overheating, what I can say is that it's just important to understand the camera's limitations, and then you can make the decision based on your needs and workflow if it is right for you or if it's not right for you. And speaking of limitations of action cameras, I think it's also important to talk about low light performance, which is not amazing, but it's also not amazing on any action camera, because even with a taller sensor, you're still talking about a really, really tiny sensor that is just not collecting a ton of light. So of course, as is the case with pretty much any action camera, these definitely perform their best in bright light conditions. The 11 is the best low light performing GoPro that I've ever used, but it's still gonna start falling apart pretty quickly if you're in dark environments. I definitely recommend turning off stabilization if you're in a low light situation, because that's when you get some really weird, trippy looking effects because of stabilization and the low light, and things just go a little bit crazy. But now let's quickly talk about something that's new to me this year, and that is the GoPro Quick app. I actually did subscribe to the GoPro plan through the Quick app because it just seemed like a good deal. I think there's different sale prices. My mom got it for $25 a year, but I got it for $50 a year. I think if you get it when you buy the camera, it also makes the camera a little bit cheaper. I don't know, seems like a good deal to me. Ultimately, my favorite thing about the app is how easy and accessible it does make not even just the 11, but even previous models of the GoPro. One of the biggest problems with action cameras is you take them out, you film all this cool stuff, you have all these cool clips, and then you just sort of have them on this camera with this like, you know, little tiny memory card that you have to like put into an adapter. If you're somebody like me who has a video production workflow that you're comfortable with, that's not too much of a hurdle because you're used to just managing media and offloading footage and using editing software. But if you're not, that's a huge hurdle. What do you do with all the stuff that you filmed with these cameras? And that's where the app And that's where the app really saves the day, because not only does it make it easy to offload your media, but it also has the auto highlight feature. So it's pretty easy to connect your camera and discover it, and it will kind of just show up automatically when the camera's turned on in your phone. And then you have all these different options here. You can go on and view media that's on the camera immediately after filming it. So I know this is nothing new, but this is the easiest way to get footage from the camera to your phone if you want to share it really quickly and easily. But one thing that's really cool is GoPro Studio. If you wanted to go through and edit your footage together really quickly, you have a built-in little video editor here, which, to be honest, is probably not something I'm going to use that much, because if I'm editing footage, I'll just be doing that in Final Cut Pro for a video. But suggested highlight reels are incredibly fun. Basically what you can do is you can edit something from scratch, or you can select clips and then have GoPro kind of edit them together for you, and you can adjust it if you want. They use music from a royalty-free music library, so you can post the clips anywhere you want without any issues. But my favorite part about this is the auto upload functionality. And this should actually not just apply to the 11, this should apply to the 10 and even other models as well, because they've kind of really revamped the app. And I fully admit that I'm far from the most knowledgeable person about all the app features, but I'm just telling you what I use a lot of. So right now, my Hero 11, you can see it says there's new footage, and I can press download and it's gonna download all of that footage to my phone. But what it can also do is make sure that I have auto upload enabled, and then I have these few options here. Auto upload means the footage is going to be uploaded directly from the GoPro to the cloud while charging. And then auto clear means if you want, after it does that, it'll just erase the memory card for you. I love the idea behind this, because what it means is when you've used the camera and you filmed a bunch of stuff and you come back, you just plug the camera into a USB-C charger and leave it there, and it's going to save your footage, charge the camera, and then when it's done, you're gonna have a clean memory card and a fully charged battery. But the really fun thing is then this will give you an auto highlight reel. Something that looks kind of like this. It's honestly a really fun way to just get your footage immediately into a shareable format. And so I think of somebody like my mom, for example. I was able to get her a Hero 10 for her birthday, and I know she's not somebody who would want to spend time transferring stuff from a memory card and then having to learn some kind of editing program. But now she can literally just plug in the camera, the footage is saved, she gets an auto highlight reel, she can share it, and it's just super easy. Even someone like me who loves editing and being a total control freak over my footage, the highlight reels are still really fun for social media, stories, and things like that if you just want to quickly get something going and share it with people. The way GoPro explained it was like you get home, you plug your camera in, go eat lunch, and then when you're done, check your phone and you're gonna get your highlight reel. But it's really exciting. Every time I get my little notification that a highlight reel is ready, it's always fun to like see what they decided to do with the footage that I shot. People who may have been too intimidated or thought things were too confusing to use in the past, the cameras are so easy to use. The app really helps you get something at least out there and ready to share, and that just sort of opens this up to a whole new group of people who probably couldn't or wouldn't want to use them before. So I think the last thing to talk about if we're talking about GoPros is to talk about other cameras. There's definitely no shortage of other cameras out there on the market, but I think the three big players in this space are GoPro, Insta, and DJI. Now for me, I will fully admit, and if you've made it this far into this video, it's probably pretty obvious, I am biased towards GoPro. That's what I've been using since the beginning. I absolutely love these cameras. I have a ton of fun with them. I do also think that, at least in my experience and from what I've seen, GoPro does give the best image quality of those three main brands. You can get a less expensive camera from DJI, for example, that has really great features and works really well, but the image quality is not quite as good as the GoPro. You can get all these really awesome 360 cameras from Insta. I made a video about this one, the Insta 360 One X2 a while ago. And in that video, I said this was like some of the most fun I've ever had with a camera, which is totally true. So anytime I want to do anything with 360, I'm going to grab this camera, which is a 5.7K camera. And actually now this is the old one because they just came out with a new one. This is so much fun to use for anything 360 related, but if it's just side-by-side footage, the GoPro absolutely crushes the Insta360's image quality.
You look glorious, Benno.
So that's kind of where I stand, is that Insta360 is the way to go for anything 360 related. I mean, it's right there in the name. And then between GoPro and DJI, I prefer GoPro because I like the image quality more, and I just like GoPros more. Image quality, form factor, all that kind of fun. For me personally, GoPro knocks it out of the park. And speaking of things that knock it out of the park, thank you to everyone who helped support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you sat through this entire long video, but you still want more, check out this video right here.